Hi and welcome to another Dech Academy video. This lesson is going to be covering the topic of changing the subject of a formula as it is popularly known. However, you need to realize that an equation is an example of a formula, where a formula is just a relationship between variables. And we will just be focusing on changing the subject of an equation. But just so you know, another type of formula will be an inequality, which also relates variables. And in such relationships, you can change the subject, but don't worry about that, and let's just focus on changing the subject of an equation. The whole concept of changing the subject of an equation will be demonstrated as follows. So there is an equation here, which is x plus y equals 3. This equation involves two distinct variables, the variable x and the variable y. Now, one could want to know what x is in terms of y and 3. And for one to do that, one has to make x the subject of the formula, which would mean that one would then be able to say that x is equal to something. If you have this equation, and you wanted to make the variable y the subject, meaning that you wanted to find out what y is in terms of the other terms in the equation, such as x and 3. You want to find out what y is in terms of 3 and x. You have to make y the subject of the formula. And when you do that, you have y. You have an equation which you can read as y equals something. Same thing here, x equals something. So when a variable is the subject of an equation, you will be able to read the equation as the variable equals ... So here we can say x equals 3 minus y. Here you can say y equals 3 minus x. In this equation, by just reading it and reading what you see, you can't say x equals whatever. You say x plus y equals 3. That's how you read it. Changing the subject allows you to say exactly what x is. Change the subject to making y the subject of formula allows you to say exactly what y is. And that is the aim of this concept in mathematics. So, as an example, starting with the equation, a very simple equation, x plus y equals 1. In order to make x the subject of the formula, so we're aiming to make x the subject of the formula. In order to make x the subject of the formula, how do we proceed? Well, the aim is to, remember, have an equation where you have x equals something. And if you notice, in the original equation, you have x and y on the left hand side. In the final equation, you just have x on the right hand side. On the left hand side. Meaning that the procedure of making x the subject of formula is essentially the same thing as isolating x on the left hand side, i.e. having x as the only term on the left hand side of the equation. Another point I'll add is that not only will x be the only term on the left hand side, x will only appear on the left hand side of the equation, but don't worry about that, I'll come to that later. So the procedure is as follows. You modify the equation using mathematical operations such as addition, subtraction, division, multiplication, and any other mathematical operation you can think of. And these operations you've been using them since primary school. Here are some of the things you can do to the left hand side and right hand side of an equation. So just to remind you, we are trying to make x a subject of formula in this equation. This is an equation which has a left hand side and a right hand side. So the left hand side is basically the collection of terms to the left of the equality sign, while the right hand side is all the terms to the right of the equality sign. So here are the things you can do to the left hand side and right side of the equation. You can multiply by a number or a variable. You can divide by a number or a variable. You can add a number or a variable. You can subtract a number or a variable. You can take the square root of the left hand side or right hand side. You can raise the left hand side or right hand side to a power. You can do any mathematical operation you can think of to the left hand side as a whole, to the right hand side as a whole. Now, just before I even proceed, I just want to give you an idea of equations and preservation of equality. So imagine I have two, call these baskets, and in this bag I have these bags. I have 3 balls. So these black dots are 3 balls. As you can see now, there are 3 balls in this bag and there are 3 balls in this bag. Both bags have equal number of balls. Now imagine if I take 1 ball out of this bag. There are 3 balls here and there are 2 balls here. What I've just done is I've disturbed the equality. I've just disturbed the equality. But what if I take 1 ball away from this bag as well? What I've done is I have now achieved equality again. So remember, initially we had 3 balls in each bag, and then I took 1 ball from, actually I took 1 ball from this bag, and then I took 1 ball, and now I've taken 1 ball from this bag. What I've done is I started with 3 balls in each bag and I took 1 ball from both bags each, meaning I did the same thing in both bags. And by doing the same thing to both bags, I've preserved the equality. Initially they were equal, and I changed the 2 things the same way, meaning they would obviously be equal again after whatever change I made. And that is the idea that's going to be applied to making a variable the subject of a formula. So with x plus y equals 1, if I want to make x the subject of the formula, I want to have x equals dot dot dot. I want to be able to say x equals something, which means I want to have x as the only term on the left hand side. And I achieve this by getting rid of every term that is not x on the left hand side, here for this case, because here we already have x on the left hand side, and I have y. If y is no longer on the left hand side, then only x will be on the left hand side, and x will be the subject of the formula. How do you get rid of y? By and still obey mathematical rules? Well, we can do any of these, and even any other thing you can think of. But what if we subtract y, which is a variable, subtract y from both sides of the equation? Because remember, originally the left hand side and right hand side are equal, so if I make a change here, I must make the change here. So if I subtract y from here, I'm going to subtract y from here, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to subtract y from both sides, and when I do that, this becomes 0. I just got rid of y on the left hand side. Now x is just on the left hand side, and now I have x equals to 1 minus y. X is now the subject of the formula because I can read it as x equals 1 minus y. It's in the form x equals something. X is the subject of the formula. So I'll show you an example. And just as a quick trick, actually, a trick question. If you were asked to make x the subject of the formula in this equation, what would you do? Well, the obvious answer is there's nothing left to be done because x is already the subject of the formula. As you can see the equation in its form, you can see that x equals 2. You can say that x equals something. So x is already the subject of the formula. There's nothing that needs to be done. So I'll give you an example where you actually have to do some work. In the equation 2x plus 3y equals 4. If you're asked to make y the subject of the formula, you want a form where y is the only term on the left hand side. Now, as you can see here, there's a term involving x, a term involving y, but you just want y. You don't even want 3y, you just want y. So what can I do? Well, this 2x term I don't want on the left hand side. Let's get rid of it. How do you do that? Subtract 2x from both sides. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to subtract 2x from the left hand side. I'm also going to do the same thing to the right hand side. If you rewrite this by grouping like terms, so if I bring this minus 2x here, so I'm just literally rearranging this side without breaking any rules, changing the order of their positions. That's all I'm doing. I get this. Now you can see that 2x minus 2x cancels out to give 0. So 0 plus 3y equals 4 minus 2x, which is 3y equals 4 minus 2x. Again, remember, we want y equals something, not 3y equals something. How do we get rid of the 3y, which is here, which is the coefficient of y here, this 3y? Because if we, how do you get rid of 3? Because if you get rid of 3, you just have y. How do you do that? Well, divide both sides by 3 to get rid of the 3. Remember, in the rules I showed you, you can divide the left hand side and right hand side of the equation by a number, which is what I'm going to do here. If I divide both sides by 3, I have 3y over 3 equals 4 minus 2x over 3 here, 1, and I have y equals 4 minus 2x over 3. Now you can say that y is equal to something, and that something is 4 minus 2x all divided by 3. So what we've just done is we've made y the subject of formula. And all we did was just carry out some mathematical operation to, the left hand side and right hand side. So here we did a division, and we also did a subtraction. So that's it for that example. I'll just throw in another quick example. Imagine you have the equation. I should stop using y. Imagine you have equation p squared equals 9. So p is a variable, and you want to make p the subject of formula. You want an equation in this form, p equals something. Well, what do? Well, I have p squared here. What if I take the square root of both sides? So square root and you can see that if you do that, you get p, square root of p squared is p, square root of 9 is 3. Now you have p equals 3. So starting from p squared, you just have to think to yourself, how do I get rid of this squared? Well, what you do is you take the square root and you get p. And then right hand side comes square root of 9, which is 3. So that's a quick and easy example. And just finally, just to stress a point I made earlier about having x as the only term on the left hand side, and also making sure that x doesn't appear anywhere in the equation, I'll use this quick example to demonstrate. Now in this example, I'm going to use a better one to make it faster. This example, now the x is the only term on the left hand side. Here we can say x is equal to something. However, x must be the only term on the left hand side and must only appear on the left hand side for it to truly be the subject of the formula. Here you have x also appearing, and x also appearing on the right hand side. So what you do is bring all x's together on the left hand side. So how do I do that here? Well, if I subtract 2x from both sides so that I can get rid of the 2x here. I mean, you have a 2x here on this side. If I subtract 2x from this side, I'll get rid of the 2x, which is my aim. But whatever I do to this side, I have to do to this side. And that's what I'm going to do here. Subtracting 2x from both sides gives, here we have x minus 2x, which is minus x. Here I'm just going to rearrange before simplify as this. So I have minus x equals 0 plus 4. Now I have minus x equals 4. Again, we want to say x equals something, not minus x equals something. So the final step, so you can have an equation in the form x equals something, is to multiply through by minus 1 to get rid of this minus sign. So multiply through by minus 1 to give, minus 1 times minus x equals minus 1 times 4. Minus 1 times minus x is plus x. So I'm just going to ignore the plus and leave it as x equals minus 1 times 4, which is minus 4. Voila, x is the subject of the formula. X is the only term on the left hand side, and x only appears on the left hand side. And that's pretty much the idea behind changing the subject of formula. So if you have any questions, leave a comment. If you have any specific examples from like a past example that you want to solve, leave a comment, let me know. I'll try and get it done ASAP.